Right, everybody. Back with the Daredevil episode 8 review. And spoilers, not much action went down, a lot of talking and that, so like I'll have to get on with it quick. So, starts off where Bullseye is in his cell and that, and then he's getting escorted to where he's asking why is he getting moved, because he claims he's working for like the government or whoever's in charge and that. Well, they don't think he is, so they stick him in a cell where it's full of inmates and that. Well, I was thinking some action's going down, but no, I didn't. Anyway, then Mr. and Mrs. Fisk are talking, and he thanks her for her help, which confirms that she did set up the mob boss last episode. So um, he's happy Fisk is with her, and but she says that Fisk is throwing the business away and that, but Fisk says he's gonna go and reform it into somewhere else and that, and then he takes her to a building that he wants to show her something. Well, then Matt's bed is talking about killing Muse and that. Well, Matt says that Muse and DD are not the same because DD saved her, as in Daredevil. So, but she says though that she saved herself because she shot the Muse dude. Well, then the PR dude, he knocks on the door and he asks for the bed. I forget her name, but anyway. Then Fisk, he's showing Mrs. Fisk the like cellar place that he's got, where then Fisk shows that he hasn't killed Adam, sort of like fling. Well, Adam is pleading to be released, but Fisk tells Adam to shut up and that. Really good fucking acting and that way. Yeah. But Fisk says that he can't stand the thought of Adam's hands and his body being there, hairs and that, and Adam's like a constant reminder of the affair she had. So, well, anyway, then the PR dude, he gives Matt's bed a letter from Fisk. Well, spoilers, it's an invitation to a ball, that sort of celebrationally done for Fisk and Mrs. Fisk. Well, um, Matt asks how he knew she was at his place because apparently it's Matt's place. So, well, the PR dude says that Fisk knows and sort of like cares a lot about his sort of like people in his sort of city and that. And then after Matt shuts the door, he asks how she knows the PR dude. Well, spoiler, it works out is because Fisk is and Mrs. Fisk are having therapy sessions with her. But anyway, Mrs. Fisk asks how and why Fisk like kept Adam and that. Well, Fisk says he's better with his emotions these days and that, and he just can't live without her and that, and sort of like claims that like he could have killed him, but he didn't. Which I thought he was dead from the beating he took, but obviously not. and you see his injuries where I think in this Daredevil they're not showing really bad injuries. Like it's sort of like cartoon, sort of like, oh yeah, people get a right bad beating, but they've got a little bit of a bloodied nose at the end of it. Well, anyway, um, then it's where Matt is sort of like works out that Fisk is one of their clients and that, and he says she doesn't know Fisk, and he says that like she's getting used, but she says that he's their mayor and that shit. Well, as you can see with that Adam's face, not much injuries and that. Well, Adam says he'll leave and that, you know, he'll just get the fuck out of there if she lets him out the cells and that. And says like he didn't know, like it was Kingpin's bed and that he was shagging. So, well, he sort of like says this, trying to plead for his life and that. And he didn't want any of it to happen and all that. Well, then it's back to Matt where he's saying Fisk is trying to use her to exploit her in order to like get to Matt sort of thing. Well, before Matt leaves, she reads the letter that's an invite to the ball and it's got like a guest that she can bring along where Matt takes a sort of hint and that and agrees to like go with her to the ball thing. Well then Mrs. Fisk shoots Adam because Mr. Fisk gives her a gun and I think she knew the intention. So anyway, she shoots Adam so he's dead now and that, which I find like, yeah, people aren't dying with injuries because fucking Bullseye in the first episode fell off a 3-story building, even though the Americans would call it a 4-story building, and survived. So yeah, but when they get shot though, well, then Fisk promised he'll never leave her again and that. Where then Foggy 2, she's talked about a case that Matt's gonna do. Then she says about Bullseye being moved from protective sort of custody to general population wing sort of thing. Well, Matt's happy about this and that. Well, Foggy 2 says that a friend of hers says that Bullseye wants to talk to Matt. And she doesn't know why Bullseye wants to talk to Matt, but she knows. Well, Matt asks who moved Bullseye, but she doesn't know. But she says it's probably Mayor Fisk and that. Well, then Fisk, he tells the PR team that the task force is a success and that. That he's got, you know, his cop mates that are going around stopping all these vigilantes. And the PR do says like vigilante crime is down and that, but the PR bird says that they've had complaints about the task force having unethical methods, which means like police brutality sort of thing. Well, Fisk says like he don't care because it's working and that. Well, Fisk congratulates the young PR dude for getting his bird reporter mate to write some good articles on the task force and promotes him to deputy mayor, where he's fucking buzzing to fuck sort of thing. And Fisk then says that the young PR dude needs to get in with the council sort of people of the city that like all vote on what can be done and what can't be done and that. Well, the bad um, PR, she says that Daniel will be over his head and that it's too much for him and that. But Fisk says though that like the young PR dude is the future of the city and that. Well, then Matt talks to his client and he knows by his heartbeat and that he's lying and calls him a liar and that and says they can't defend him as it's in sort of against the law to defend someone that you know is guilty or lying, which I don't I don't know if it's like exactly true because I know there's a few lawyers that have like defended people. Anyway, he claims all that it's unethical for him to do it and that. Well, then Foggy too asks Matt what's going on and that because Matt like just walked out and that. And Matt says he told her not to take that client on as he like knew it was a bit dodgy. But she says it's too late as they are sort of defending him now and that. Well, Matt then as he's sort of leaving admits he's been a bit pissed off with things lately and he's had enough with the dude who he believes because he can tell he's lying, ripped off some teachers and I think the pension fund or whatever. Well, anyway, Foggy too says that he's been through a lot and that, and like she can understand why he's being a bit sort of like natty and that. Well, Matt says sorry and that, and he leaves. Well, he goes to this bar where Foggy got killed. Now I don't know if it's outside the front bit or it's a back entrance, but anyway, he goes in and that, and he's having a drink with an old woman who probably owns the bar and that. Well, then his detective mate he walks in and asks Matt like what's going on sort of thing. Well, Matt says about Bullseye that is being moved into general population and that, which means that someone's wanting Bullseye to get killed or badly beaten up that he's in a coma or whatever. Well, Matt says that this is strange and that why Bullseye's getting moved and that. Well, the detective mate says like, oh, yeah, Bullseye was just sort of like trying to like kill people and that, and he killed Foggy and he killed Ginger Bear, but it's probably nothing that's like what Matt's got to worry about. It was just like a revenge. He tries to make out like it was just some revenge mission that Bullseye was on. Well, the woman then she brings out a whiskey bottle that Foggy was drinking before Bullseye killed him and that. Well, because it's a real expensive whiskey and that, Matt disagrees and that, but then he realises that, oh yeah, Foggy would have been drinking that because he was celebrating that he knew he was going to win a court case against Don Betty, which must be like one of the mob bosses that like he got some evidence on and was going to take his crime syndicate down. Well, the detective mate, he says like he's not sure and that, but Matt says he's got to go and that, and he leaves and that. Well, then Matt goes to see Bullseye, and Bullseye says like he didn't think Matt would like talk to him and that, but then Matt's asking Bullseye if Fisk hired him to kill Foggy, and Bullseye he changes the topic and that, and says like Matt he thinks he is like an animal, so obviously Matt does think he's an animal because he killed his mate and that. Well, Matt, he's not answering that because he asks again about if Fisk hired him to kill Foggy. Well, Bullseye says he'll be killed if he's left in general population and that, and then says if Matt once was a good man, should I say, he would defend Bullseye and that. Probably trying to creep around, Matt. Well, anyway, he says though if Matt can like get him out of like general population and that though, that he will tell him who hired him if he can get him sort of like out and that sort of thing. Well, Matt, he grabs Bullseye sort of like by the back of the head sort of thing, and he says like he doesn't trust Bullseye and that. And then there's a bit of the action comes in, starts smashing Bullseye's head onto the table and that. Where then Matt, bit of a like sneaky technique that maybe some lawyers have used, then claims that Bullseye was smashing his own head against the table and shouts the guard to like remove him. And that where the guard comes in and he's like, "Oh, the crazy bastard," and like takes him out and that. Where Bullseye's sort of like smiling and that, and then it's where the PR bed and the young PR dude are like talking to each other and that. And she says like to him, it's too soon for him to be promoted to be deputy manager. But he says though, sort of like, well, he likes her in that, and they're both on the same side, so like it should be all right. Well, then he goes over to talk to the reporter Baird, where she's not happy with him after he made her write about the task force taking down the Muse dude and not being Daredevil sort of thing. Well, he says he was being hard on her and that, but it got him promoted and that, and now he's sort of like deputy being mayor and he's head of communications, sort of like press communications, as in he can like decide who Fisk and talks and doesn't talk to and that. And then he says he is gonna take as many opportunities as he can and that to like further his career or whatever. Well, then two of like Fisk's backers and spoilers, one of them supposed to be this swordsman, which is a bit like Zorro, who was a vigilante. Well, he's talking and he asks where her husband is, but she says she doesn't know and sort of like leaves and that. Well, then Matt's bed leaves a message to Matt saying he could have let her know he wasn't not going to be turning up to the ball. So she's like not expecting him to turn up and that. Well, then Mr. and Mrs. Fisk enter the room and that for like the photo opportunity of like the night, like press sort of like photo shoot. Well, then Bullseye, he's having his head wounds sort of patched up and stitched, where you see it. Where I thought he was creaking his neck, but he doesn't. He bites out one of his loosened teeth or tooth, should I say? But anyway, doctor finishes and that, and like leaves the room, puts the surgical scissors on the tray and that. Well, then the prison guard cop sort of like comes in to unrestrain him and take him back to his sort of like general population cell sort of thing. Well, he sees like somewhat in Bullseye's mouth where in closer inspection it's like a gold tooth. I think it's a gold tooth. Oh yeah, but anyway, if it's not, it's just not what. Then Bullseye, he spits the tooth right into the cop's eye, where the cop's like really distracted by this, and he's in a bit of pain. Well, then because one of the restraints was like undone, takes off the other restraint, gets up, snaps them surgical scissors in, well, breaks both the scissors apart, sort of thing, and throws each one at the guard and the doctor, where he kills them both, or definitely looks like he's killed them both. Well, then feels his sort of like mouth, I think, for bruising and swelling sort of situation, but then it goes in like a blue sort of like colour, where I'm sure like it's nothing to do with the hospital, or if it is, it might it might be these blue lights. I don't know, but anyway, that sort of happens, and then um, Matt's bed. She's sort of like at the party and that, and Mrs. Fisk comes over and talks to her and asks if she's alone, where she says yeah. Well, then Mrs. Fisk says like, oh, she should join her in that sort of thing. So she sort of like does. Well, then you see Bullseye, who's got on to a bus that is going to sort of get out of the prison, sort of driven out with the other guards, thinking he's a guard taking him home, sort of thing. And then Mrs. Fisk, she thanks Matt's bed and that for the marriage counselling and that, and says her and Fisk are okay now and doesn't need any more sessions or out. Well, then Matt, he enters the ballroom sort of thing, and then he sort of like sees Fisk, even though he's supposed to be blind, but he's got daredevil vision. And sort of like his bed, she comes over and sort of greets him and that. Well, Matt apologises for being late, says he was talking to Bullseye, which she's a bit surprised at, but she don't care in that. She's like, yeah, well, I don't need to know, sort of thing. Well, then Matt, he hears Fisk talking to someone and that, where you see that Fisk takes this dude into a private room to ask the dude for like a money investment sort of donations to his project that he's doing, where he's cleaning up the streets and getting like these vigilantes off. Well, um, this dude though, he says like he don't want to invest in that. Like he's not like really sure like of what he um, Fisk is asking and that. Well, Fisk says before he says no and that, he needs to listen to him, because then he claims that this dude is the swordsman, which is a vigilante dude and that. Well, the dude, he claims he doesn't know what Fisk is talking about and that, and he doesn't admit to being the swordsman, and asks Fisk if he is threatening him. Well, Fisk says no, he's warning him, and that he is sort of like going to be watching him sort of thing, and so yeah, yeah. Well, then a dude takes a picture of Fisk where he knows like he's not a member of the press team. He's like I think he's dressed up as a waiter and that, so he's even more suspicious. But anyway, Fisk though he sends like a member of his sort of force in that to go after the dude, where the dude gets sort of collared in the hallway near the kitchen and that, and security guard sort of like starts to like questioning the dude, giving a bit of a rough up and that. Well, the security cop gets the dude, but the like chief commissioner tells the like cop it's like police brutality and that, and he needs to like stop him that. Well, the cop says like it's not. This is sort of thing. Where then he like sticks the dude's hand in a fryer, and the fryer's on and all, so he is like fries his hand and that. Yeah, the dude's screaming and that. Well, that's when the cop he says like, hey, no, that now that's an assault sort of thing. But then he claims that the chief commissioner is not going to do anything about it and that, as he doesn't work for the chief commissioner anymore. Which he basically tells the chief commissioner that if he's got a problem, see Fisk because he's working for Fisk now, and so he can do what he wants as long as like Fisk is not going to give him any shit. Well, anyway, the young PR dude he talks about all the people in the room and that, and saying how they want to get close to Fisk and that. Well, the Baird reporter she says about corruption and that, where the young dude doesn't like her attitude and that. Well, she says that they should be speaking truth to power, where he sort of admits like yeah there should be in that, and he sort of like says that they should dance, like calm the situation down. Well then she says like yeah she will do, but first she goes to the toilet where she talks to like the chief commissioner, and she's asking if Fisk asked his permission for the task force team, where he talks about her article about Muse, saying she gave the task force team credit for getting Muse, but anyone with a brain knew it was Daredevil, claiming that she's sort of like a propaganda tool to Fisk. Well, she says like she sort of like did this stuff about the same time he was put in charge of this special service task force team, where the chief commissioner he says he's not in charge of it. He says like Fisk is in charge of the task force team, and then he says to her, "Did you know like Fisk was the top suspect in her uncle's murder?" And she said she knew, and that says she is investigating and has another profile of a reporter that she's writing as, and says like if the chief commissioner needs to have any story told, she'll do it and that. And the chief commissioner says he has a document file on all the members of the task force team, and she wants to have a look at them, but obviously they're at this ball thing and that, so she can't do it right now. So she goes back to talk to the young PR dude. Well, Matt, his bed complains to Matt, saying like Fisk is using. Matt is complaining to her, saying like Fisk is using her to get to him, and that he's still trying to make see that Fisk is not the nice mayor dude she thinks he is, and that. And Matt, he says he wants to talk to Fisk, where he goes over and that, but he tries to walk over, sort of thing. But Fisk is like thanks one of his backers and that, and then before Matt can get to talk to him, he starts to have a dance with Mrs. Fisk, as in the first dance of the night, sort of thing. Well, Matt, he's sort of like dancing with his bed and that, and Matt is sort of like hears Fisk talking about devils and consequences, where Matt tells his bed sort of like if anything happens, she needs to get out of town, just leave, sort of thing. Well, then the PR dude he gets a call from the prison letting him know that Bullseye has escaped and that. Well, then you see um, Mr. and Mrs. Fisk dancing and that, and she's like tells Fisk that she wants to tell him something and that, and then you see Bullseye going up in the lift slash elevator with a spac. Well, I thought it was a spatula, but it's a pronged fork that he took from the kitchen, and then the PR dude he comes over and tells Fisk, says about like he's tightening up security because Bullseye has escaped and that. Well, Matt hears Mrs. Fisk at this point saying that she needs to tell like Mr. Fisk something and that, and Matt at this stage he works out that Mrs. Fisk has hired Bullseye to kill Foggy for her mob boss friend that like she was like running the organisation, so she was like dealing with all that sort of clean up sort of stuff. Well, then Matt he gets his bed to swap dance partners with the Fisks, where then Matt he says to Mrs. Fisk that he knows she hired Bullseye to kill Foggy, where Fisk and Matt's bed are like dancing and that, where yeah, Fisk didn't like do a white laser beams out of his eyes. It was just the way the camera glare light was. But anyway, that's the way I took the, and I couldn't probably to take another one. So yeah, it's not like Fisk has developed laser power eye sort of device. Well, anyway, you see at this stage where Bullseye is on the top floor balcony and he's aiming and that, and then Matt he asks Mrs. Fisk if she knows, or if Fisk knows she had Foggy killed, where she asks if his bed knows he's Daredevil, which that must mean Fisk has told Mrs. Fisk about Matt being Daredevil. Well, anyway, at this stage, Matt hears Bullseye loading his rifle or cocking it, one of the two. Well, Bullseye gets ready to like take his shot and that, and then he like fires, which then Matt throws himself in front of Fisk, where he takes a bullet to the shoulder, which you can see he like took on being a bodyguard for Fisk and that. Now, I don't know if the bullet went straight through and sort of ricocheted off his shoulder bone and came out the other side, causing Fisk to get blood on his white tuxedo. But anyway, Fisk is alright though. And then Matt's sort of like on the floor and that. And the crowd sort of like are running away, where his bed though, she sort of like stays there to see if like he's alright, sort of thing. Well, then security rush Fisk and Mrs. Fisk off away to like the safe room or whatever. And then see Matt laid on the floor, where then a red tinge sort of like happens on it, where it ends. So yeah. So not loads of action. Hopefully, there's going to be loads for the last episode, but if there isn't, it's not my fault. But anyway, thanks for watching. Cheers. Bye.